on the NewsChannel 5 network. This is OpenLine.
Good evening and welcome to OpenLine. I'm Matthew Torres, hosting on NewsChannel 5 Plus for tonight. Now, we are talking about, as usual, many topics that really rouse up people and really a good conversation to have since it's very timely. And one tonight, we are discussing the Sanctuary City bill that we have learned today has reached the governor's office. And to discuss and delve more into this topic, we have the co-director of the Tennessee Immigrant Refugee Rights Coalition. I know that could be pretty clunky, but Turk. We have Stephanie Teatro with us, and also with the Public Defender's Office, we have Mary Catherine Harcombe. So thank you so much, ladies, for being here today. Stephanie, I know you have really been in the forefront with your organization, really advocating for immigrants, their rights, and particularly when it comes to sanctuary cities. So what is the latest update regarding this bill that, like you said, this has really reached the governor's office today?
Yeah, so our organization works with immigrants and refugees, but also U.S.-born Tennesseans to make sure that our communities are strong, that they're connected, and that all of our neighbors are able to fully participate and fully contribute. And so we've been working to stop this bill throughout the legislative session, and we're now urging Governor Haslam to use his power to veto the bill because we think it really makes communities much less safe. It undermines public safety. It will make immigrant families less likely to take their kids to school or access critical services, and it's really bad for our whole state.
Now we'll discuss more what the bill actually says and talks about. Sure. But for you, how did you get involved?
So my job at the Public Defender's Office is I work primarily with our non-citizen clients. There was a Supreme Court case in 2010 which said that all criminal defendants who are non-citizens have a constitutional right to know the immigration consequences of their criminal charges or criminal dispositions, as well as the criminal consequences. So my job at our office is to work with that population and make sure our lawyers know what to advise their clients and what those consequences will be. Perfect,
ladies. Thank you for introducing yourselves. If you guys have any questions and really any comments, the number right there is on your screen, 615-737+. Don't hesitate. We would like to hear from you guys, especially even for those who may have questions about the immigration process. We do have an attorney with us to really discuss that. All right, Stephanie. Controversial bill, needless to say. I know there was also an effort from the city's standpoint locally, but this is obviously now the state perspective. What is the Sanctuary City bill?
Yeah, so Sanctuary City, it's a little bit of a misleading title, both for local policies as well as for this policy. It's an easy sort of campaign or election tagline to use, but what this bill is about is driving a wedge between immigrant communities and their local governments. So it would require that all local governments and state government agencies, from police to schools to hospitals, help with deportations. It really creates a pretty seamless pipeline from local governments to the deportation pipeline. It would require all agencies to go above and beyond what's required by federal law to do the work of the federal government.
They have to comply with ICE.
Yes, so one piece deals with jails specifically and says that no matter what, local jails will have to detain people for the federal government at local taxpayer expense. It prohibits local jails from asking for a warrant or from even having proof of probable cause, which opens up our local communities to significant legal liability.
And so you mentioned going above and beyond what the current laws are now. What is the current law?
So the current law right now is, federal immigration is a federal issue, and the Federal Immigration Enforcement is a large agency responsible for enforcing immigration law. What this bill would do would take those responsibilities and put it onto our local police, our local teachers, and other public employees.
And I know that the Sheriff's Association in Tennessee has been quoted before saying how things are now are working. Terry Ash.
Right. So the comments that we've heard are that right now all local cities and counties, all of our local jails and local law enforcement are fully complying with federal law. So some of the concerns that we had from local law enforcement was that it takes away all local discretion. So sometimes people are held and ICE will send an initial request for them to be held for longer periods of time, but then the sheriff might find out that actually they have the wrong person, the birth date, the last name wasn't right, and so they're legally required to let that person go. So the sheriff's office had expressed concern that this bill would prohibit them from releasing someone, violating their rights, and opening up our local communities to legal liability.
And just to be clear, Mary Catherine, you can join in. There are no quote-unquote sanctuary cities in Tennessee.
Correct. And I don't like calling this an anti-sanctuary city bill because I think that's misleading. It goes much broader. The concept of a sanctuary city is where, from sort of top down, there is a policy in the city saying no communication with immigration. What this bill does is it doesn't just say the city can't make that decision. It says each individual agency, department, subgroup can't make that decision. So it goes much farther than just targeting any sanctuary city rules. It takes discretion away from every small division of the government.
So where did this term sanctuary city, what is the definition of that, and where did this term come from?
It's an old term. It's been used both to describe cities that are welcoming and celebrate the diversity of their communities, to those that really try to draw a bright line between the work of the federal government and the work of local governments. What we know is that communities work best when all members of that community feel safe calling the police to report a crime, feel safe bringing their kids to school and attending parent-teacher conferences. And so what this bill does is really blur the lines between local government and federal immigration enforcement, which will make us all less safe and undermine the good work of our local communities.
Now, I just want to read, this is one of the amendments, in fact, the last amendment of this bill, and what really stood out is assume that local governments are currently in compliance or will choose to comply with the provisions of the legislation in order to avoid a loss in state funding through ECD grants. What part of this bill is, I guess, if the city is founded to, I guess, violate or not compliance with the bill, then they will not get grants?
Yeah, so the bill does two things. One is that it creates a new penalty. Already sanctuary cities are prohibited in Tennessee, but this adds a new provision where local communities wouldn't be able to get economic community development grants, which we know are critical for the economic growth of our communities. But it also really expands the definition of a so-called sanctuary city, so that even a school could trigger the sanctuary city definition.
Mary Catherine, legally, I mean, I know this has been passed by lawmakers. What's the legal standpoint when it comes to that, getting grants and, I guess...
What do you mean, what's the legal standpoint?
From a local agency.
What is it going to look like here on the ground?
Yeah, pretty much, just as far as how that, what kind of impact that will be.
So obviously my area of expertise is in the criminal justice system. But as Stephanie was saying, the problem with the bill and the overreach of the bill is that not only does it prohibit the city from having overarching policies, it prohibits even, let's say, the police department's domestic violence team. They cannot have a policy that they will not ask about the immigration status or communicate that status to ICE for women who call the police to report abuse. They can't have that policy under this bill. If they do have that policy, they are subject to punishment. They are subject to the withholding of funds. And interestingly, the bill is set up so that anybody in Tennessee can report it and push, you know, triggering that penalty. Not just a member of Nashville, a member of our community, a member of any community, but anyone in the whole state.
Representative Jay Reedy and Senator Mark Green were the sponsors of this bill. Have you ladies been able to speak with them regarding this bill and really put forth your feelings and opinions and really concerns?
Yes, so we've been engaged in the legislative process since this bill was introduced. We testified in front of committees. We've shared not only the concerns of our organization, but of schools who want to make sure that their employees don't need to ask students and families about immigration status. Of course, local law enforcement expressed concerns for the reason that Mary Catherine said. We want victims and witnesses to report crimes. That's critical to the safety of our whole community. So we, along with all of these groups, certainly spoke with the sponsors and spoke in committee.
How did this funnel through the legislature? I mean, was it an overwhelming support to pass this? And from your standpoint, what were lawmakers saying aside from the sponsors of the bill?
There were so many outstanding questions about this bill that the sponsors were unable to answer. Like you said, local law enforcement had expressed concerns. Many local city county officials asked questions about how it would be implemented and what it would mean. So in one of the final committees that considered the bill, they actually voted to send it to a summer study to be reviewed by experts to figure out exactly how it would impact local communities. But leadership in the House of Representatives decided to override that decision and bring the bill to the House floor on the very last day of session and rush it through for a vote. While many legislators don't, I believe, really understand how they've tied the hands of the local communities.
What about you, Mary Catherine? Were you surprised to see this go through?
I was definitely surprised. To me, this bill, I understand that there's so much dispute and debate about the role of immigrants and immigration in our country, in our communities, in our state. But to me, this bill really goes beyond that. And as Stephanie said, it ties the hands of local organizations. It ties the hands of local governmental agencies and prevents them often from affecting common sense internal rules and policies that further their own missions. To me, that there is very much against the general ethos of our state.
All right, I know we'll have much more. We'll go to break. If anyone does have any questions and any comments about this topic, again, the Sanctuary City bill that's now reached the governor's office, make sure to call the number on your screen, 615-737+. We'll have much more with these ladies after the break.